What's up, Gene? What are we talking about today?
Well, Mo, we can talk a little bit about Watch Journey.
Love it.
Um,
Wait, first,
yeah,
actually, what's on your wrist? What's on your wrist today?
I am wearing a Audemars Piguet John Mayer Perpetual.
Yeah. Yeah, show me.
Now I'm actually I'm actually wearing a Yachtmaster 40 rose gold on an Oyster Flex.
Dope. I love that watch. I love that watch a lot.
Thank you.
I am wearing the watch that started it all off for me. Good time to talk about Journey, actually. Not to say this is my first watch, but this is the watch I lusted after for many, many years. It's a Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. This one's the 41 millimeter, 15400 ST, if we're talking reference numbers. But love it. It's a little chunky. It's chunky monkey. I got tiny ass wrists, but we'll get into that. But
Okay.
but yeah, that's what's on my wrist today.
All right. Well, tell me a little bit about getting that watch. It's obviously an incredibly difficult watch to get now.
Now, yeah.
And maybe it was when you got yours, but what was your path to actually getting that particular piece?
So it's interesting. I got to go back a little bit. I had just graduated business school in 2017, and that's when I got this watch. 2017, it was hard to get Royal Oaks. Certainly, it's always been hard to get the jumbo. But this 15400 wasn't particularly hard to get, but well, I guess listeners, you can't see me, but I'm an Indian guy, and we like discounts. So, it's in my blood that I can't go buy something at retail. Particularly back then with watches and jewelry, or whatever, you could, we always knew someone that ran an AD in the Caribbean, and so this actually it took a while to source, but I was able to get it through at the time, AP had authorized dealers. Obviously, they don't now, but it was from a dealer in Jamaica. And I was able to get it, and I was able to get it at a discount, which is crazy to think about these days. But it was a grail of mine at the time. And it's interesting. Maybe another episode we'll talk about grails and sort of whether they truly exist or not. And, I think everyone has a grail until they get it, and then they have 8 more grails. But I was incredibly fortunate to get this, and, I wore the hell out of it as my daily watch, which may seem ridiculous to some people, but I couldn't stop looking at it. It felt so good on my wrist. And, now many, many watches later of this terrible habit we have, it still feels like the first day I put it on. So it's a good memory.
Is it a permanent part of your collection?
Oh, 1000%. I'm not someone to say that I'll never sell a watch. Like I take that pretty preciously, and I'm always happy to trade in and out of watches. But this is one that marked a moment, and it was something that I kind of grew up wanting. So even if I do get the jumbo at some point, which I definitely will, I hope I will, this will always stay in the collection.
Okay, so quick question. Remind me what year it was again?
2017.
2017. So probably a little bit before sort of this cycle of, waiting lists and that sort of thing, at least as we know it today. I'm sure there's still waiting lists for particular pieces at the time. Just out of curiosity, were there any pieces at that time that maybe you passed on to get this particular Royal Oak that you look back in retrospect and say, never should have let that one go?
I don't know about on the journey to the Royal Oak, but you bring up a decent point. Like the maybe 2 weeks after I got this Royal Oak, I was in a store in Soho called Material Good, and at the time they were an Audemars authorized dealer, but they also sold a bunch of pre-owned high-end pieces, and I got offered a 5711R, so a Nautilus rose gold on a leather strap. I can't remember the exact price, but I think it was listed at 16,000, and they were willing to give it to me at 12,000. I mean,
wow,
different times, man. That's actually a really sore subject. I'm tearing up a little bit talking about it. But that's my biggest regret. But now I'm on a journey to another Nautilus.
There you go.
Yeah.
First watch ever that sort of was your entry into, watches as you sort of know them and love them today.
So I had a ton of G-Shocks growing up. Like that was like baby G's was big when I was in like 4th, 5th grade. Loved those. And I think you and I actually were talking about this just before we pressed record. And I don't think we've ever talked about it. Knowing each other as long as we have, to discover that we both had the same, first real watch, if you will. Mine was a Tag Heuer, but I don't remember much about it other than the fact that it was on a blue rubber strap, and I thought it was the most like luxury thing I could ever get, and it was awesome. But tell me about yours.
Yeah, same. I mean, it was a Tag Heuer, stainless steel, on a bracelet. Couldn't tell you the model, reference number, other than to say that I'm fairly certain it was quartz, because I can't recall ever winding it, and don't think I had the budget at that point for it to be an automatic movement. I'm guessing it was probably 36 millimeter. I look at it now because it's still at my parents' house. I just unearthed it the other day. And yeah, fairly certain it was 36, just looking at it on my wrist.
I mean, it's pretty incredible you still have it. I mean, listeners don't know, but Gene is a massive hoarder of things. In fact, we are sitting in his apartment in Brooklyn right now, and it is just jam-packed with kind of the story of your life, which is cool. But I'm incredibly jealous that you have your first watch.
Yeah, but to be fair, just so people don't get the wrong impression, while I do have and collect quite a few things, I'm not a hoarder in the I immediately think about the television show. So it's not as if we're walking around or have to navigate around boxes or
I should say it's curated. You're a curated hoarder.
But there is some clutter, to be fair. I'll be open and honest about that. So yeah, but that was definitely the first watch. I did take a break after that in terms of my watch collection. I'd say my second watch, or what really I think opened the door for me, in 2012, I got a bonus from work, and I thought, what better way to celebrate and acknowledge that moment than to get a Submariner, which I had always, in my mind, sort of perceived as being kind of the first, it's like your starter watch.
We made it.
Yeah, it's your starter watch in kind of fine watchmaking. So at that time, you could just walk into a Rolex store, get one out of the case, which is what I did. So that was my first, kind of watch in kind of a fine watchmaking sense. That opened the door for me, and since then, I've had quite a few, but
it's a novel concept, like for people these days, walking into a Rolex dealer and just, what's in the case? That's great. Exhibition only wasn't a thing.
It wasn't.
Yeah,
it wasn't. I definitely can't recall ever that ever being, kind of the case. So, but things are turning around now.
Things are definitely turning around. I mean, people will tell you that have been into watches for a while, and had the money to spend on them. Like it's interesting. Like you think about how people look at spending money on watches these days versus, I guess pre-hype, pre-pandemic. Buying, like it's crazy. Like once you're in this watch culture long enough, like people are like, oh, an affordable watch is under $10K, which is just like kind of wild for people who don't really, mess around with watches. But like people used to tell me that you could walk into the Tiffany on Fifth Ave and there would just be like Tiffany signed Nautilus and Aquanauts just sitting in the case, which is a day that I wish I lived through, but sadly not. But so the Sub, you still have it?
I do. I actually, and this is maybe controversial. I recently had it polished, and I had a few sort of bits replaced, mostly because at that time I really wasn't that concerned about keeping it pristine, and it really was my daily wear for many years, and the wear and tear on it was pretty substantial. I mean, I dropped it several times. The crown had a huge dent in it. There were pretty significant scratches all over. And really, because in my case, I do consider it to be a permanent part of my collection, I was really less concerned about, I was less concerned about sort of the resale value and the idea of keeping it unpolished.
Right.
And so I sort of looked at it as a second opportunity to start over. I do think from here forward, I probably won't have it polished, and I'll sort of take any any scratches, any kind of desk dives, as a little more of kind of the story behind the watch.
Totally.
But I did have it refinished pretty recently.
Also, I know it's Rolex these days is like the ultra luxury brand. That it's always been aspirational, but these were tool watches, right? I mean, the fact that you wore it and you scratched it. Great. You used it like a Rolex should be used. Now, I don't know. Now you buy a sub and it's like polished everywhere and, shiny ceramic, and it's fine. That's great. But it was a different watch. And so I think Rolex watches are meant to be worn, period. Sure. Like you have a precious metal Journe, maybe you don't go beat the hell out of it, but like, I don't know. Rolex, to me, always, it just should be worn. Scratches tell a story. And you baby it too much, it's you're kind of not using it how it should be used. Yeah,
I mean, people always say that Rolexes are bulletproof.
For sure,
they're meant in some respect to take a little bit of a beating.
For sure,
there are other watches in my collection that are far more delicate, and you can just tell in terms of handling and that kind of thing that they're probably not meant to be dropped, and if I did do that, there would probably be a more meaningful issue. But yeah,
I'm saying this like I don't baby my watches. Like I wear my watches and I cry at the first scratch and then kind of let the rest come. But
Right.
but I am also the guy who puts on a jewelry glove to put on and take off my watch at home, which is not the coolest thing ever, but I don't know. Back on the journey a bit, we're talking about going from Tag and you to a Rolex. I grew up wanting to be part of like flex culture. Okay. And I guess the early 2000s, massive watches were in, like just size wise,
like Panerais.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Panerai. Like, so I have family in Hong Kong, so I grew up going to Hong Kong a lot, and I actually went to Shenzhen, which is known for like a massive market of like fake goods, and I do not recommend buying fake watches, just to be clear. But when I was younger, I had like a fake Panerai that I loved. I felt so cool in it. And the watch that I was like, I really wanted was a Hublot Big Bang, which is just, awful to me now. And we could talk about Hublot and like maybe how overblown the hate on it is. But I just loved how sort of flashy that bezel was, and like the bigger the better, like 44 millimeters, 46 millimeter limited editions, like give me just more and more watch on my wrist. And ended up my 21st birthday, I got a Cartier Santos 100 two-tone. Well, 100, for people who don't know, is like, it's a big boy. And I wanted it because I couldn't get the Big Bang, and I wanted just a massive, chunky watch, which is weird to go Cartier there. But I beat the hell out of that watch too.
Nice. Well, funny thing is I said that I was wearing a AP John Mayer Perpetual, mostly because I know that is your personal Grail watch.
Oh, 1,000%.
So let's talk a little bit about grails as a concept, and maybe you can just start with that particular watch and why it is your grail.
Oh, for sure. It has nothing to do with John Mayer. I do love John Mayer, and like I don't know if you guys know this, but both Gene and I are in the music industry and have been for a while. But it has nothing to do with John Mayer. I do like that they didn't like put him front and center on like the front of the watch. I think the back may have his signature or something. I don't actually know. As you can tell, I haven't gotten hands on with that watch. But one, I just think the QPs at AP are just incredible. I love that it's done in white gold. I mean, I know there are purists out there that think a Royal Oak should be steel because that's kind of the whole point. It was the first luxury steel sports watch. But this is just so elegant with that dial and the history behind it as a callback to past models, sort of respecting the heritage of the watch, if you will, but bringing it into a modern era, and it being a watch that you can wear literally anywhere, anytime. Maybe not London these days, but I just mean
not if you value your arm.
Correct, but really just like if you want to wear a tux with it or jeans and a t-shirt, it looks equally as badass in everything. And so, what does it go for like $350,000 on the secondary right now, which is wild. And like, to me, and maybe this is what you're getting at, Gene, and I want to hear your thoughts on like what a grail is, but to me, a grail really shouldn't be attainable with like an impulse decision. It's something that is so out of reach that, it's not going to keep me up at night that I don't have that watch. I love it. If I could ever get in a position to get it, something amazing must have happened to put me in that position. But I'm also okay just like loving the watch, And if I ever see it in person, fantastic. Like that kind of makes it. I don't need to have it on my wrist necessarily. But tell me, how do you think about grails?
Yeah, I think first of all, I don't know that I have. I know some people think about grails as being this sort of pinnacle of watch collection, insofar as that if you were able to obtain it, it would be sort of the end of your collection, right? That you're done, so to speak. I don't know that I think about grails in that way. So my sense of what a grail is probably has evolved over time. I will say that one of my grails at one point was something that I was able to get, which was an AP Royal Oak chronograph. Since we're talking reference numbers, is a 26331 ST. So sort of the Panda.
Love it.
And had a big, life moment where I was able to get it, and I do find myself, now that I have it, transitioning to thinking about some other things. So I will agree with the concept of a grail being somewhat unattainable, at least in sort of your current situation. And as that sort of concept has evolved over time, that's kind of the way that I think about grails.
Can I ask you about that Panda AP? When you got it, did it live up?
I mean, it did, but so much so that I almost felt afraid, and still do in some respect, feel afraid to wear it. I can probably count the number of times that I've worn it on two hands, and I've had it for at least 4 to 5 years now.
Wild, dude.
I should wear it more.
Wear that watch.
I know.
What are you doing? Wear that watch.
I know. I just, it is so precious to me that, yeah, to your point that you made earlier about watches meant to be worn, I do need to take that advice myself. So I'll make a more concerted effort to wear it with more consistency, but it's just been pretty rare.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, there's also watches that are not meant to be worn all the time. Like I don't know. I'm trying to think about. I know you just recently got a beautiful, what is it, rose gold day date
Yeah.
baguette indices.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful watch.
Chocolate dial.
Yeah, I mean that's a, I get that you don't wear that watch every day. That makes sense.
Yeah, that is definitely not a daily driver.
Yeah,
But I do think for the right occasion, it totally makes sense. And I've worn that from time to time, just as the situation is sort of dictated. That watch being, kind of a bit more appropriate for that circumstance. But but that's fair.
We pegged my Grail at a John Mayer AP Perpetual. The Grail, I guess, before that, and will still be a Grail for me, and kind of interchangeable to a degree with that one, is a 5740, the Nautilus Perpetual. Just like the wearability of it and the beauty of that movement, and just, I mean, Patek Perpetual Calendar. How do you get better than that, Gene?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then, like that's the problem with Grails. Like now we're talking about this, I want to mention like 7 other watches, and that's okay, because like I don't know, just if you're in a position where you've been into watches for I don't know, 5+ years, a decade, whatever it is, I just appreciate great watches, and I don't need to go own all of them, and I'll be very lucky to own some over time. And I just like the idea more than Grail. I like the idea more of just appreciating watches I know I'll never own. That's cool with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You did mention with the John Mayer that there was some, I guess we'll call it a pro or a plus, that it didn't necessarily have John Mayer branding or a signature of some kind. I'm wondering if you feel any differently, just since we're talking about AP, about the Travis Scott, which from a pure optics standpoint has way more visual cues.
Oh yeah.
To Travis Scott, who, to the point about collection, 10, 15, 20 years from now, not clear that he'll be as popular or maybe not an artist with sort of legacy in that way. So would you feel differently about owning, let's say, the Travis Scott piece?
100,000%. But I will say that I think AP doing that Travis Scott collab was brilliant. I think it's controversial, I guess, in the watch world, like how people feel about it. But I honestly I think the controversial part about it is that AP collectors were like, why would you do this? But who cares? You're people of the past, like the whole point is that what I appreciate about it is it's so forward looking, right? You want to make your brand an aspirational brand, and you tap into the zeitgeist by bringing in Travis Scott, who obviously is a great artist, but then also just has like a massive following of the next generation of watch buyers. And they're not going and talking about Patek Philippe Perpetual calendars. They're not talking about like 5970s or the 5004, like that's not happening. Maybe it is. Maybe they're watching a ton of YouTube videos and fine. But like when you want to tap into the masses and you want to create this aspirational piece, I think it's phenomenal. So I just want to state at the beginning that I think the move was a good one. Yeah. Do I think that particular watch has staying power and like, does it live on beyond its zeitgeisty moment? My feeling on that is no. But we also don't know when we're in the presence of legends. So Travis Scott could be this.
Could be.
Yeah. And I think you got to make those bets as a brand. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's ultimately the challenge with that particular watch is being able to assess as a collector, where that artist, in this case, Travis Scott, will be, 10, 15, 20 years from now. I will agree with you as well, just about the tact that AP has taken with respect to just marketing themselves to a younger generation and creating this sense of aspiration around the brand. It's a tact that I'm not quite sure that any other brand has taken to that extent.
Arguably Omega with the Moonswatch.
Ah, yeah, it's actually a good call. But just as a contrast to both Omega with the Moonswatch and maybe AP with, some of their brand affiliations, Patek obviously isn't doing any of that. And there's been a lot of controversy around Patek in terms of the Cubitus, obviously, some of the statements from their CEO.
Yeah. They're going the opposite direction.
They
right?
are going
Yeah.
in a different direction. From your perspective, how do you think that lands?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what do they make? 70,000 watches a year?
Mm-hmm.
I guess you can kind of do that if you want. I mean, if you want to be the old man brand that targets the 1% of the 1% or whatever you want to call it, there's a world for that. Like, I don't know, you look at fashion, like I don't think Loro Piana cares if a bunch of Gen Z wants to buy their clothing. They know that as people make a bunch of money and travel around the world to Italy, Switzerland, whatever, and hang out at these great hotels, they're going to aspire to the men in their 50s that are just draped in Loro Piana. So, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm on the fence about it. I think AP has always been a leader in tapping into the next generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think very early on they did collabs with Jay-Z and tapped into hip hop culture pretty early.
LeBron.
Yeah, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like sports, music, right? That's always been two of their pillars. And it's never been that way for Patek. Patek just kind of floats in and out of the zeitgeist, and I honestly don't think they care whether they're being rapped about, whether they're going to be mentioned in any pop culture moments. I think they just sort of rest on their laurels and say, like, we have enough heritage. I will say, I think there's a risk to that.
Right. I mean, I'm not a marketer, but I do wonder, is AP playing the long game a little bit better than some of the other brands?
I think so, Gene. I also think that, Patek discontinuing all the steel Nautiluses, or Nautili, however you say it. I get the move. Kind of, I guess. They kind of want to put the Cubitus in the sort of front seat for the steel entry level, and big air quotes on entry level at a $40,000 steel watch. But I don't know. The Aquanaut was created as an entry level piece, and I haven't heard anyone get that at retail ever.
Right.
So I don't love the strategy of the brand. Like, I got to go in there and, maybe I have to wait 2 years for a $75,000 chronograph in white gold, which is a beautiful watch. But like, if you have entry level watches, let that be the entry into the brand. And I'm not saying AP does any better with that, but I think they're trying cool stuff, and I think the code actually is evolving over time as well. I mean, I know that's another sort of, I don't even know if you'd call that controversial. I just don't think many people like it, but the movement is sick. The concave crystal is awesome. They're doing cool stuff with like ceramic mid pieces, mid case rather. I don't know. They're trying stuff, and that's like, I respect a brand that tries stuff. Like, if you're gonna keep doing things that you've done in the past and expecting it to work, like, over time, maybe it doesn't work. Or maybe Patek Philippe is one of those brands that's just going to be the same brand over and over every year, decade after decade, and there'll always be enough rich people out there who grew up wanting a Patek.
Maybe. I just, just wondering out loud. Although I will say, since you mentioned the Cubitus, which was highly controversial when it came out, but I've found, looking at wrist shots, that it looks far better on wrist than it did in some of the press and sort of marketing photos that came out initially. And I do find that, just generally speaking, even with the code, I think having seen the code in person, the concave sapphire, beautiful. I think the case and the way that the that it calls back a bit to the Royal Oak in terms of
Mm-hmm.
its shape. Also, like a very kind of cool shout out in some respects, while sort of evolving, the brand into something new. Um, that happens a lot though, where when you see something in person, see it on wrist, it's far more impressive than some of the photos.
Definitely, and we can save this topic for another episode. But like, I think seeing it on wrist is one thing, and then it's interesting when you see it on a celebrity, right? And how
Mm-hmm.
people react to that, and then it becomes, a from overnight it goes from like the ugly duckling to the most sought after piece,
Mm-hmm.
and I think interesting with the Cubitus and the Code and kind of putting them in. I don't know if I should put them in the same category because I think there's a lot of problems with the Cubitus being that like they took 25 years to release a new line that is really just an extension of the Nautilus and made it square and didn't change the movement. Like you had 25 years, you're going to throw the same
Mm-hmm.
round. I don't know if you
And the same bracelet as the Nautilus as
totally,
well.
which I'm actually okay with. And you could have just called it the next Nautilus, like, and it could have the Nautilus cubed or whatever the hell they wanted to call it. But like, I don't know if you've seen it in person, but if you turn around the watch and you look at the movement, it looks so strange to have this sort of exhibition case back that's a circle on this square.
Mm-hmm.
It's very disappointing.
Is it lazy?
It's incredibly lazy. From where I sit, and we're not insiders. I don't know. We don't know the work that went into it. But I will say that I was talking to an AD the other day, Patek AD, who was saying that Watches and Wonders, which is coming up in a couple of months right now, that there's a 39 millimeter Cubitus coming out, and I'm interested to see that because with both the Code and the Cubitus, is what I was trying to say earlier, is that they both came out as big pieces in a moment where the watch world is trending smaller, right? It's like harkening back to the past a little bit. You're starting to see small watches kind of have a resurgence, if you will. And this whole thing is cyclical, right? We talked about the early 2000s when everything is 45 millimeters, and the bigger the Panerai, the better, the more power reserve, the better. We're kind of moving back into that like elegant watch part of the cycle, if you will. Here's maybe a thought. Our AP through their Code and Patek through their Cubitus, actually, are they starting the other side of the cycle again? And are they just trying to get ahead of like, hey, actually, you know what? You guys are going to think this is 2 years too early, but in 2 years, you're going to look back and be like, oh, these guys started the big watch trend again.
It's definitely possible. I think historically, watches have gone through those phases. We hear stories all the time about, Daytonas, for example, that Rolex couldn't even give away. In many cases, they either had to bundle them with other watches that were being purchased or gave them, to people at discount. And you think now, how could that ever be the case? So there are, a whole host of stories of particular models that, were before their time, in terms of popularity. So I do think, if we consider the idea of cycle, it could definitely be the case. Because we have been in this sort of like smaller watch phase for probably a few years now, where things have begun sizing down. So yeah, maybe we turn back around.
Yeah, another topic for another pod is like you look at Cartier and like how it's kind of jewelry watches and like just literally we're talking about small watches. You're seeing like a Timothy Chalamet wear actually a Panthère, which is marketed forever as a ladies' watch, and you're seeing a lot of men emulate that once they see it. And so it's interesting. I don't know how long it's going to last. And again, like I said, we'll save it for another episode. But I do think the pendulum will swing again back to bigger watches. And it's interesting to think about maybe the Cubitus being the watch to lead that.
Could be.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll bring out that Panerai again.
Well, not the fake one.
Do you still have it?
No. Okay. No, I do not. All right, Gene, this was awesome. This is the Dialed In Podcast, guys. Hope you tune in next time.
Amazing.